The day I dropped my daughter off at her new daycare, another mother called her toddler over by name, and I had to grip the fence to stay standing. She'd named her little boy after the man who murdered my entire village. Let me back up, because you need to understand why a name knocked the air out of my lungs. I grew up in a small farming community in a country I won't name here, during a civil war that most Americans have never heard of. When I was 9, a militia commander led the men who burned our village to the ground. My father, 2 uncles, and my older brother were killed in a single afternoon. My mother got me and my baby sister out through the fields in the dark. We walked for 11 days. Eventually, we were resettled as refugees, and I built a whole life here. Citizenship, a nursing degree, a husband, a daughter. I thought I'd left the worst of it buried on the other side of the world. That commander's name was known across our region the way certain names are known only to the people they hurt. To everyone else, it sounds like an ordinary name. To us, it's a curse you don't say out loud. So when I heard that mother singing it out across the daycare playground, calling it sweetly, the way you call a child you adore, I genuinely thought I'd misheard. My brain refused it. Then she said it again, clapping for him to come get his juice, and there was no mistaking it. My ears started ringing. I had to put my hand on the chain link fence because the playground tilted. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Names travel. Maybe in some other language it meant something gentle. I needed to know, so I made myself walk over and make small talk. I complimented her son. He was a sweet, round-cheeked little boy, completely innocent, which somehow made it worse. And I asked, as casually as I could manage, where she'd found such an unusual name. She lit up. She said she'd heard it years ago. Maybe in a song or a show, she couldn't remember exactly. She just thought it sounded strong and beautiful, kind of exotic. She said it rolled off the tongue. She had no idea. None. Not a flicker. And here's the thing that hollowed me out as I stood there nodding and smiling. I realized that name had passed through so many hands and not one person had stopped it. Not her partner. Not her own parents. Not a single friend who'd cooed over the baby announcement. Not the nurse who filled out the birth record. Not the clerk at the county office who typed it onto a legal certificate and filed it with the state. Every one of those people had looked at that name and seen nothing. To them, it was just a sound. To me, it was the last thing some of my family ever heard. I didn't tell her. I want to be clear about that, because people always ask why. I looked at her son's face. He was maybe 2, blowing bubbles in his juice, giggling, and I understood that none of this was his fault, and very little of it was even hers. She is a product of a place where that war never made the news, where the man behind that name died unpunished and unmentioned. You cannot be horrified by a history nobody ever taught you. But I went home and I cried for hours. Not at her, at the size of the forgetting, at the idea that a man could erase my whole bloodline and then, decades later, and an ocean away, have his name spoken with tenderness over a juice box, and that this could happen quietly, with paperwork, with a county stamp, without anyone ever noticing. So this is the part I actually need you to hear. People love to say we've moved on, that we know enough about distant atrocities, that constant remembrance is excessive. I used to think remembrance was about grief. It isn't. It's about recognition. It's the only thing that lets an ordinary person look at a name and feel something catch. That small internal snag that makes you pause and ask a question before you put it on a birth certificate. That snag is the entire point. It's the difference between a history that protects people and one that simply repeats as background noise. The next time someone tells you we don't need to keep teaching the hard parts, that it was long ago and far away and surely we've all heard enough, I want you to think about a little boy on a playground blowing bubbles in his juice, named after the man who ended my family, and no one in his whole life ever flinched.